Some things you just roll with. You don't give them any second thought. This is called a blackboard, but is it really a blackboard or a very, very deep green board? Why is soup not a drink? Why do American children pledge allegiance every morning to a flag, if not to indoctrinate them into the lies that both the American government is invested in them beyond their ability to output labor, and that liberty and justice are in fact for all? When it comes to Magic the Gathering, we also do this. We often let it roll, shortcut, get to the end of the interaction, which often means we misunderstand how those interactions function. In a prior short, we asked what would happen if we have Cloud Midgar Mercenary equipped with a Sword of the Animist, an Heirloom Blade, and Lava Spur boots, and we attack with him. Cloud is then targeted with a turn you into a monkey ray in response. Now, assuming Pongify resolves, how many triggered abilities fire from the start of combat to the resolution of Pongify? Most of you were pretty close, a few of you were pretty spot on, but there are some weird ones in here, and there are some things that maybe wouldn't make sense if you haven't looked into this before. So let's get into it. First, of course, let's start at the basic foundations. Let's define what a triggered ability is. A triggered ability is an ability that says when, whenever, or at, indicating that when the required moment has occurred, this ability will automatically trigger. We see this with something simple like Aang Airbending Master, who says, when Aang Airbending Master enters, make a magic purist incredibly angry. Boom, triggered ability. Now, of course, within triggered abilities, there are different types of triggered abilities, like reflexive triggers, sort of embedding themselves within a triggered ability. It's interesting. But for this video, we don't need that sort of depth. Cloud Midgar Mercenary has a fun line of text that says, as long as Cloud is equipped, if a triggered ability of Cloud or an equipment attached to Cloud would trigger, it triggers again. So let's start simple. Sword of the Animist and Heirloom Blade clearly state whenever in their text. So we know that these are triggers that could be duplicated by Cloud. Could be. So let's walk through the scenario thus far. We attack with Cloud, we get 2 Sword of the Animist triggers. That's it so far, and that's easy enough, right? So we're going to move to the part where Pongify comes out and targets Cloud. Now, note that Pongify doesn't use when, whenever, or at, so Pongify has no triggered abilities, right? What's fun here is that Pongify targets Cloud, and Cloud's shoes were made for Ward. Look, I'm not good at this. Ward is interesting because we often treat Ward as a sort of, you can't target this thing unless you pay. And often in Commander games, we just sort of let people wind things back if they forget that Ward is on a creature. But what is Ward? Ward is actually a triggered ability. Ward specifically says, whenever this permanent becomes the target of a spell or an ability an opponent controls, counter that spell or ability unless that player pays whatever the cost is. A spell can be cast and it can target something that has Ward. Ward sort of acts like a counter spell in that if they don't pay the Ward cost on the card, then their spell just sort of goes to the graveyard and nothing happens to the thing the spell was targeting. So when Pongify sets its sights on Cloud, Ward 1 from Lava Spur Boots is actually a triggered ability, and it will trigger twice, causing Cloud to dial M for monkey. Again, I don't know. I wrote this and I don't know. Now, we're assuming in this case that the person using Pongify does pay the Ward cost. So Cloud dies. And this is where things get odd. You may look at the blade and say, well, Cloud is dead, so the blade triggers, but it only triggers once because Cloud is dead. It wouldn't get the double triggers. And I would understand where you're coming from. But to better understand this, let's look at like Blood Artist. Blood Artist says whenever Blood Artist or another creature dies, target opponent loses 1 life and you gain 1 life. Now, triggered abilities traditionally only really work while on the battlefield, unless for some other reason otherwise stated. So if Blood Artist is destroyed and sent to the graveyard, how does it trigger? How does it know that it's died? Because to die is to go to the grave, and once it's in the grave, it triggers. How does that function? And Rule 603.10a. You didn't think you were gonna get through this video without looking at a straight up rule section, did you? I didn't think so. 603.10a states that some zone change triggers look back in time to examine the board state before the time of the actual event, sort of examining the scope of everything before the event itself happened. Otherwise, how would Blood Artist know that it died? How would it see an entire board wipe if it weren't able to retroactively look back and go, hey, what the fuck? In the case of Heirloom Blade, for it to trigger, it looks back in time to examine the board state, and it says, hey, I was being wielded. Dilly-dally, shilly-shally.
Dilly-dally, shilly-shally.
I had to say it once. I still love Advent Children. And because of this examination, the Heirloom Blade will also examine that it was equipped to something that doubles its triggers, allowing 2 Heirloom Blade triggers to hit the stack. If you want more information about this, just look up Cloud with something like Skull Clamp. It is the same concept where Skull Clamp, if equipped to Cloud, would draw you 4 cards, 2 triggers. 2 clamps, 1 head. Don't Google that. Don't Google that. So to recap, we're turning Cloud sideways during combat. We're attacking. We're getting 2 Sword of the Animus triggers, 2 triggers of Ward due to the Pongify targeting Cloud, and when Cloud dies, 2 Heirloom Blade triggers even after Cloud is in the dirt. May he serve the live stream well. And that's it. Ward is weird, right? Anything that says it can't be countered just gets around Ward. Ward literally doesn't affect Void Rend. It's a good time. Blood Artist and Skull Clamp are really good use cases to keep this rule stuck in your head of looking back when something changes zones. Thank you for being here. We appreciate you very much. You look great today. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise, including yourself. Drink your water. Don't let depression win. Fight the good fight.